was debating which country to go to, and then ultimately settled on Egypt. I had just turned 18. Everyone was telling me, it's okay, we'll see you in a few months. There's no way you'll be able to survive it. Oh, why are you going to go study Islam? Get a degree from here before you go over there. To make that decision, one had to consciously leave behind things that were a worldly advantage. Each person had their unique set of challenges. Like I remember people coming from a certain area close to Russia, and some of them were sent back to their countries and directly put in prison because they went to study Islam.
How can we stay grounded if the ground feels like it's constantly shifting?
Allah shows us signs. Allah Azza wa Jal is aware and Allah is directing. If I become that aware, then success will be that much more attainable. You don't succeed in life by running away from the challenges. Stick to your principles, because if you give up your principles, you will lose your identity. Every revival had the spiritual path front and center. The rise and fall of Islamic scholarship is linked with the rise and fall of nation.
Is there one question you think every Muslim should be asking themselves? And what a heavy hitter we have today into the studio. Shaykh Osamah is in the building with us. How are you feeling, Shaykh?
Alhamdulillah, doing good.
Alhamdulillah. We wanted to get into your story to understand not only the life and times of Shaykh Osamah, we also want to talk about navigating the changing times. Something that's been underpinned in your story when we talk to you is how the changing time has been like this momentous force in your life, you know? And we want to talk about specifically how the world, or especially like the world that we live in today, is one that is constantly changing, constantly shifting. The ground beneath us is always moving, so it never really feels like we can really build on anything. And how do we navigate this specifically as a Muslim? Because we feel like as we set our goals for intentions, or as we set our goals for success, we want to keep that in mind. So if you don't mind us getting into it, I was wondering if you could share some details about your background, your upbringing. Looking back, did it feel like there was anything especially unpredictable or changing for you when you were growing up?
You know, my story is from the community's story, meaning from the Muslims in the West in general and from the Muslims in this pocket, in this area. Things are rapidly changing. And, you know, I think the realities of life just emphasize for us that the consistency of circumstance is an impossibility. That's what we say in Arabic, دوام الحال من المحال. Things never stay the same. That's why Allah made day and night and made seasons and days and months and years. So things through my personal life went through a lot of different change as well. You know, growing up, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I grew up at the ICPC community. And at that time, we just had one masjid and one khutbah actually. And that khutbah was led by our beloved Shaykh Tanani in Arabic. And then with time, the need grew to having a second khutbah. With time, the need grew to having a second masjid, and then a second khutbah in that second masjid, and then having a third masjid. And mashallah, the community has come a very long way. I remember from my parents' generation, a time when there wasn't really many masajid in the area at all. And, you know, someone near and dear to me, someone I consider like a father, Amu Fikri, tells me about a time when in all of New Jersey, there was one masjid that they would go to. SubhanAllah, you know, it's amazing to see that growth. For me, you know, a large part of my journey was in the public school system. I went to Islamic school for a few years, but my circumstance led that you know, my later years be in public school. And it was right around when September 11 happened. I was finishing middle school, going into high school. And my name, Osamah, right? My background, Palestinian. And these different factors made it very challenging for me in that environment from many different angles. A lot of different challenges that sort of pushed me to come closer to the masjid. You know, and when I came closer to the masjid, you know, it introduced me to a new journey, and that's with the Quran. Started memorizing at 13, finished at 15. I was going every single day to the masjid after school, staying till late times and getting rides from different peoples to and from and stuff like that. A lot of beautiful memories.
I wanted to talk about that because there was like these two opposing forces, like the environment of school, especially around 9/11, which was, I'm sure, definitely a little bit more on the hostile towards you, and then the sweetness of the masjid being inviting and being a space for you to actually explore what your purpose is and what you're good at. I wanted to kind of get your input and maybe your reflections at that time of what challenges you faced growing up, and how do they compare to what young Muslims like encounter today?
You know, I guess getting exposed to the public school experience just opened my eyes to if you're someone who really wants to seek Allah's pleasure and avoid haram, sometimes you'd be put in situations that are really testing for your faith. I remember certain decisions I had to make because I didn't want to fall into anything wrongful. You know, ended up making me feel sort of marginalized as an outcast in that type of environment where haram is encouraged, where if you do not do haram, you're considered as someone strange. So that was a big challenge for me, where you're put in a situation where you could do something wrongful, but because of something bigger, you push yourself to do the right thing. You know, being like in a situation where haram is so accessible has never been more apparent than it is today. So these are changing times, absolutely. If you wanted to be a person who lives a double life, or hide and conceal certain things about you from those closest to you, it's very easy to do that with the social media reality that we have today and with what society promotes. And also, you know, the other thing was like certain things were still seen as unacceptable during those times. When I was in high school, it was before the LGBTQ plus movement picked up steam. It was still seen as something foreign, something unacceptable. And that's how it was spoken about in school when I was there, even in public school at that time. So definitely changing times and different circumstances. But again, like certain features are just consistent, you know.
I know in today, mashallah, our population has grown so much. And every school now you see like more than enough Muslim kids. And there's a level of support that you have by having fellow Muslims there. When you're going through this public education system, how many like Muslim kids were there for you?
I went to Clifton High School.
Okay.
So there was Muslims at that time, not with the numbers that there are right now, and not with the level of support or acceptance like you said. So you know, I guess, you know, at that time Clifton was still you know, growing into the new reality that we see now, where there's a huge presence of minorities. At that time, it wasn't like that. So certain things, you know, would happen that, you know, come across as racial prejudice or some hostility towards religion and Islam. Still, Muslims were understood at the time. You know, it was awkward to pray in public or even request to pray in public. Now it's very mainstream. It's not even something, they even have a place to pray in the airports right now. It's not like what it was, you know, back then. So, you know, definitely things have changed.
Do you think that there was a single defining moment, perhaps even like a personal crisis, that made you realize your purpose was rooted in Islamic scholarship, leading to Al-Azhar, as you said, Egypt?
I remember the last surah I memorized, you know, which is Surah Fatir. A very, very beautiful surah that starts off with telling us about Allah's great blessings upon His creation. Whatever Allah sends down upon His creation from His mercy, no one can withhold. And whatever He withholds, no one can send down upon them. That's one of the first verses of Surah Fatir. Surah Fatir is a very beautiful and spiritual surah. It's the last surah I memorized from the Quran. But yeah, you know, each one of them had its own particular flavor. You know, how did it give birth to my Azhar journey? So I guess, you know, when certain leaders in our community in ICPC saw how attached I was to the masjid, to the Quran, they suggested, why don't you go study Islam in more detail? And the masjid will support you. And they did for the first half of my journey. And I guess that brought my journey along with someone I consider very near and dear to me, a beloved friend, Shaykh Yasser Fahmi. We went to Al-Azhar around the same time, 07, and I guess that's how it started off. I went to Egypt. You know, I was debating which country to go to. I was weighing the pros and cons of each, and then ultimately settled on Egypt. And one of the factors in that is because I have a common face going along on the same journey in Shaykh Yasser. So yeah, that's how I got to Al-Azhar.
What a change. You're coming out of northern New Jersey, which, you know, there's definitely certain blessings and comforts here. And then you get shifted into the heart of Egypt. Azhar is known for testing their students' patience, resilience, grit. We've had a couple of shiyukh on the show that made it aware that it wasn't always the easiest transition, going from the West into Azhar. Were there any particular memories or experiences that from that time you still carry with you and help shape, that you felt like helped shape you as a leader today?
Oh, a ton. The 8 years I spent at Al-Azhar are the best years of my life. They weren't the easiest years. They were the toughest. They were the toughest years, but they were the best years of my life. When I went to Egypt, I was an 18-year-old. I didn't go to college here in the U.S. I went directly out of high school. I had just turned 18. And before that, I had always been living with my parents. It was the first time living on my own. It was definitely a big culture shock. Never lived in the Muslim world. And even for Arabs, Cairo, which is one of the biggest capitals in the world, is a very challenging city. We actually refer to in Arabic as Qahirat al-Nufus. It breaks down the ego. It's a very, very busy city and like loaded with things happening. Not always in the most organized way,
Was there
I
any?
should say. I remember one of the, among the first days that I was there, I got food poisoning.
One of the most painful things ever.
Yes. I had all kinds of things happen to me there. I remember I had allergic reaction, needed to be taken to the hospital. I had been, cheated out of money because of not knowing how to operate in that type of environment, like 1,000,001 times. It just exposed me to like so many things so rapidly. The experiences that I had there. Have you ever ridden hanging outside of a bus? No.
Oh, nice. What was that about?
The buses are not going to stop for you there. They may slow down. You don't jump on in time, you're gonna stay waiting. So it's not gonna happen. The life's too busy. Stop a bus so you can get on. What are you talking about? So it's not gonna happen like that. So I remember, sit in very, very interesting situations. Either on the back hanging on the back of a bus from outside, or at the door of a bus, or being crushed to death while standing in the middle of the bus, transportation against the pollution, and all the rest. It's all part of the human to be honest with you, I think this is one of the biggest challenges for people today, for Muslims in the West, or people in the West in general right now. People have been cut off of human interaction, and that's because of the gadgets, the phones. People don't like interacting with each other anymore. Don't even call me, just text me. Don't even text me in full sentences. You just say like partial words, and that's it. You should get the picture, right? The human interaction has definitely receded from people's lives, and I think that's affecting people spiritually.
Wow. SubhanAllah. No, so Cairo welcomed you with open arms, gave you the full experience. The full human experience, I should say. It's what's so interesting is it tested you. What was going on inside you in your mind? Was there ever a feeling of doubt of whether you could do this or not, or was the path just kind of clearly open for you?
Well, I'm Palestinian, and one of the things that ingrains within me is it makes me very stubborn. So before I went, I remember everyone was telling me, it's okay, we'll see you in a few months. There's no way you'll be able to survive it.
Oh, wow.
There was a lot of discouragement. Not everyone, but many people were saying that. Oh, why are you going to go study Islam? Get a degree from here before you go over there. And there's just like a lot of people trying to deter me away from it. It made me more stubborn in doing it, and I doubled down. And when I got there, like I felt it. So you felt like you were in like a war zone. Like you needed to struggle and fight against the tide and find your way. You didn't find anyone roll out a red carpet for you or tell you go study with this person or that person or another. You needed to figure out your way. One thing about spirituality is sometimes circumstances force you to turn to Allah Azza wa Jal. Like in the earlier part of my journey, it was a certain set of things. When I went over there, it was other sets of things. I didn't work. I didn't have large amounts of money in my bank account. Experiencing poverty and experiencing what it feels like to not be sure if you'll be able to find food for the day. Just like the living arrangement. For the first 2 years I was there, I lived in an area known as Nasr City, which is relatively middle class. Circumstances led me to live closer to Al-Azhar Mosque in an area called Al-Batniya. And every time an Egyptian finds out that I lived in Batniya, they hysterically laugh, because it's an area notorious for drug selling, and it's all like very narrow pathways and corridors. Cars can't get into certain areas of it and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting life experience. I really can't capture for you in a few words. It was really big challenges, So from the bed bugs to the roaches to the back pain to sleeping on the floor to all kinds of different things. But the journey put me with some of the most unique individuals that came to that area to do the same thing that I was hoping to do: learn so that they could carry that knowledge back to their countries. I learned about countries I didn't even know existed while I was in Egypt, from all over the world, people from everywhere.
It's amazing what you mentioned there, because a lot of the prominent Muslim leaders in America actually was the same cohort and the same group of Muslims that you went to Azhar with. You think about Shaykh Suhaib Webb, and you think about Shaykh Yasser Fahmi and some other big names in America today. It's amazing how that same group of hitters, Zunaid was telling me, is like it was like the Bulls back in the day, or like Real Madrid. Like it was just like the same group of people just ended up going to Azhar at the same time, and they came back and completely, laid the foundation for Islam today in America. Like, did you know, especially being surrounded by so many future change makers, did you have a sense back then of the impact that they go on to make, and what was it like being a part of that environment?
There was something unique about people coming from the U.S. to study, and that is to make that decision. One had to consciously leave behind things that were a worldly advantage. Like, people had to put their marriages on hold, their careers on hold, decide to have finished college with a reputable degree, to decide to put their future prospects in that field on hold because they wanted to serve Islam. So that is a very difficult decision. Like, I was someone graduating from high school and going over there. In fact, people over there were confused. They're like, "You're coming here to study? Everyone wants to go to America to study. Like, what are you doing?" Right? So it needed to be something, it reminds me of a statement that Imam Ghazali says. We sought knowledge for other than Allah, and knowledge refused but to be for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. So at that stage, again, you're talking about in 2007, you're talking about over 15 years, close to like 17, 18 years ago right now. At that stage, there still wasn't a number of institutes, Islamic organizations. At that time, there still wasn't that infrastructure laid in place like we see it today. Right now, we see the waves of people who've studied overseas have come back and already have served their community for years and established different efforts and initiatives. At that time, it still was in its infancy stage. So yeah, during the journey, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of the quality time I got to spend with my dear beloved brothers, whether Sheikh Yasser, who's from this part, or Sheikh Arsalan Haq from Texas, or some of the brothers that were in my class from California, like Sheikh Jamal Diwan or Sheikh Suhail Mullah, or other shuyukh who were Sheikh Hamza Abdul Malik and others, right? That were with us in the same class. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless everybody. The other side, the people who were coming to study from other countries, that also, until I got married, the longest time I've ever lived with any single individual was the time I spent with my roommate in Egypt, who was Sheikh Mahdi. He's from France. He is half French and half Syrian. Now he's in Canada. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless him. So yeah, but I lived with him for 5 full years and had, it's like a completely different world experience. My best friends were from North Africa, different countries like Libya and Algeria and Morocco, that whole area, Tunis, that whole area of North Africa. One of my teachers was from Chad. Afriqiya al-Wusta, the Congo. One of my other teachers was from Mali. Another teacher was from Yemen. One of my dear friends from Jordan. So it just put me on the same path as many people, many Muslims, Indonesia, Malaysia, you name it. Just like different beautiful human beings who are now leading their communities in their own right.
Yeah, being from that cohort of trailblazers of the West, was there any interesting or fun stories of them who might be listening on that you think back to often that kind of makes you smile or laugh?
Yeah, well, definitely there was, just to, for full perspective, there was a generation before us, but it was certain just individuals. It wasn't like large numbers or volumes of individuals, like people who went to study overseas in the 90s or in the 80s. And they came back to be luminaries for Muslims in America. So definitely their fadl and their virtue and their status, may Allah bless them and reward them. Yeah, anytime I get to connect those friendships and those interactions, they're they hold a very special place in my heart.
You had this ability to really interact with individuals from all over the world as part of your studies. And coming from a first world country yourself, you're able to see like this privilege that we have of, from the bare necessity of being able to source food, and like how our own outlook is as to something as simple as that. And do you remember how like your other classmates, like their ideas were like once they landed in Cairo, and how they dealt with those challenges? Were they similar to yours, or were they more used to it?
Yeah, so definitely each person had their unique set of challenges. Like I remember people coming from a certain area close to Russia. Their government was very hostile towards anyone going to study Islam, and they had to come to Egypt as tourists. Right? They could not even, expressly state that they're going to study Islam because they would be denied. And some of them were sent back to their countries and directly put in prison because they went to study Islam. So definitely each set of reality is very unique. We definitely enjoy a great level of privilege, freedom. Now, I'll be honest with you, like I had, my own set of challenges when it comes to going to and from Egypt because I had the 4 S's on my passport. You know what the 4 S's are?
No, we
It means
don't.
you're a super spectacular special individual. I gave you 3 S's, but it basically means every time you want to fly, you can't print out a boarding pass all on your own, and neither can the person at the desk print the boarding pass out for you. They have to call someone in the back office and make sure that it's okay for you to fly. Each time I would get extra screenings to and from. I'd get delayed for hours, questioned. I remember one of these times, I know this sort of sidetracks me away from your question, but I'll just mention it because it's real funny. It wasn't funny at the time at all. It was after being...
the best stories are always the ones that at the moment you're just like...
Yeah, I
out.
was like, I was trying to get back home, and I got delayed inside for like 4 hours. And as I was coming and I was going to the baggage claim, I picked up my baggage and I realized that one of my bags was vibrating. And I was just like 1,000,001 thoughts were going through my head. I'm like, what's happening? Did someone put something in my bag? Am I about to be arrested or something like that right now? Yeah, I thought I was going to be framed for something. So then I go to the counter for them to check my bags, and one of the bags is vibrating. And like the border patrol asked me, why is your bag vibrating? And I was very nervous, and you could tell. I told him, I don't know. I was scared. And he got terrified, and he came around and the desk, and he was just making sure, I was trying to make sure if there's any like weapons or anything like that. And then he told me, open the bag, put your hand in and then we pull it out, and I had this razor, the beard trimmer, and it was charged, and somehow it turned on. It was a very terrifying experience. Anyway, but to your question, each person had their own unique challenges. You know, some of these brothers that were investing years of their study had no idea how they're going to earn a single buck. You know, some of them in their countries, they didn't have a job lined up for them. And one of the things that we have lined up for us as people coming from the West is we're from a rare group of potential workers, right? Each community wished to have someone who proficiently speaks English and has a solid understanding of Islam, because that wasn't something that is readily available. But for many of the people coming from other countries, that was not the case. Or even for some of my dear friends, I was like in a very critical time in Egypt. I went through a lot of history. We are all collectively going through extreme change. All of us, like, you know, our lives are changing so rapidly. You know, for me, I experienced the rule of Hosni Mubarak for 4 years before the quote-unquote Arab Spring happened. And then I experienced a year of the military generals leading, and then a year of Morsi leading, and then a year of Sisi leading before I left. So 8 years. It was like revolution, chaos, problems, loss of life. Some of my dear friends from my Azhar journey, you know, were sent to prison, and some of them still are in prison. Some of them were killed. One of my teachers was killed, you know, from Egypt, Shaykh 𝐀𝐁𝐿𝐴, and a lot of other things. And they came back here, and then we're all going through our own journey of change through the pandemic, through Trump, then through everything that's happening in, you know, Palestine, Gaza. Before that, what was happening in other parts and pockets.
It seems like there was a lot of political change in Egypt when you were there, and
Ton.
it definitely did affect your day-to-day life.
Of course.
And
Have you ever been escorted with to Fajr prayers with a machete? So
wow, that is
So I remember when
Tell us that story. Yeah.
So I remember when the revolution first happened, people were very terrified because of looting and stuff like that, and the police were no longer around. So in this area that I was in, Batniya, we were one of the only student buildings in the area. So it wasn't an official student building, but it happened to be that all the ones who live in that building were students. So you know, we're pretty scared because, again, we're foreigners. Like, you know, anyone could take advantage of the opportunity to, you know, do whatever they want. But they actually took care of us. You know, we wanted to carry our own sticks to prayer to protect ourselves. So when the people in the neighborhood saw that, they said, no, put the stick down. Don't carry anything. And each one of them has their own, like, huge knife and, you know, just to protect themselves. And they just escorted us to the prayers. And yeah, so it's an interesting time. And then I remember I had to fly back because this was after the revolution. There was a chance that things were going to go bad. So, you know, I had to take an emergency flight back to the U.S. for a bit. Everyone was flying out of there. Yeah.
How did you navigate that? I mean, you were talking about specific details about the world around you, right? You have this purpose, this goal in mind, but it just seems like the world around you pushed against that. Mm-hmm. Right? How did you navigate that? How did you have the right mindset, not only to go through the struggles of living in Egypt and maybe, you know, on the tougher side of Egypt on this journey of becoming a leader and becoming a scholar within Islam? Like, how did you navigate that? What mindset did you need to, like, instill in yourself to get through it? I mean, that's incredibly difficult. The grief, the pain, the uncertainty, the fear.
Look, there's this verse in the Quran that stands out to me. I'll give you 2 verses. One of them says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَاتٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ. In the land there are signs for people who seek certainty. And within your own selves, do you not see? And then in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we will show them our signs in the horizons and the cosmos above and within their own self until it becomes true and clear to them that it is the truth. Allah shows us signs. And, you know, each one of us gets cues, divine cues, if you want to say, and divine inspiration for the path that we need to seek in our lives. Like, I just need to be attentive. I need to be a studious student of life. I need to be aware, where does Allah Azza wa Jal want me to go? What choices Allah want me to make? I need to learn from life. Allah shows me signs through the people around me and through my own personal experience. So, I think that's part of the journey that every person takes. If I take that sort of divine outlook towards the decisions in my life, then regardless of the changes, I will remain consistent. And that's something that we saw from Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, going from being the near and dear and beloved of his father, to being put into prison wrongfully, to being taken advantage of, becoming in a position of power and influence, from being able to exact revenge against those who had wronged him. But you see all the while Yusuf alayhi salam was described as this muhsin, this person of great excellence. So that consistency is critical to success. Being astute and aware to the circumstances of my life and those subtle divine indicators is critical. And that's the takeaway I get from all of this. Yeah, your circumstances might be different than mine, but don't lose sight of it for a moment. Allah Azza wa Jal is aware, and Allah is directing everything in our own personal lives. He doesn't get distracted with one life at the expense of another, or one situation at the expense of another. He's aware of all of this. If I become that aware, then success will be that much more attainable, and the change of circumstance will not affect me.
And I'm guessing it's that mentality that allowed you to not have to worry about, your next dollar to fund your studies or to come back to the US and worry if you're even going to have an opportunity to lead and be successful.
Yeah, and look, can I tell you that while I was in the heat of certain life experiences, I was not worried? No, I was, But tawakkul and trust in Allah is something that the servant learns in retrospect, big time. After I've seen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has helped me through all different kinds of situations, do I think that He's going to forsake me or forget me right now? And when I say that, everything becomes so much more meaningful when I embrace the spiritual path, right? If, it's not about a mentality or an attitude per se. The mentality and attitude is part of it. How can life become blessed when it goes from being beyond the material, the tangible, to being something bigger? What am I pursuing? If I'm pursuing a buck or a job or a position, that shallow pursuit ends. It doesn't really last. But if it's part of a bigger pursuit and a bigger purpose, it'll gain that much more meaning, right? So I perceive everything I went through in my personal life as part of this other bigger journey of finding purpose, self-discovery.
SubhanAllah, I think what you mentioned was so powerful and such a gem, because Muslims have such an edge in the world versus the secular view because we have tawakkul Allah, right? Because we save ourselves from the stress and worrying, so much so because we give Allah that respect and just that trust to iron the wrinkles out and to forge the path ahead. So, I thank you for that. I'm going to carry that in my back pocket moving forward. It navigates and it transitions very well into the next part of the episode. We wanted to discuss the navigating the changing times and the uncertainty. Even coming into the studio this beautiful morning, we had the smell of wildfire smoke on our nose, and obviously with everything changing in politics, we're uncertain of what's going to be ahead of us and Muslims ahead. We have disgusting and terrible genocide happening not only in just Palestine, in so many parts of the world. We wanted to talk about specifically from your perspective and all the struggle that you've had to go through to get to where you are today. In a world that's changing at lightning speed, the world that we're living in today, a couple of years from now, the world 5 days ago isn't the world that we live in today. If you had to list just 3 non-negotiable values that every Muslim has to hold to face the challenges of today and the uncertain challenges of tomorrow, what would it be? Maybe to add a little bit of poetry to it. How can we stay grounded if the ground feels like it's constantly shifting?
The non-negotiables, for me, I think top of the list is never, give up your principles. Stick to your guns. I think this is something that the Muslim community is learning more and more. Especially this past election taught us this. This is something I've been mentioning in my khutab for a while. Look, the shallow appearances of success, us wanting to have a certain name in office or aid, one group that gives us a bunch of fake promises and then sends tons and tons of bombs to those who are perpetuating a genocide against our brothers and sisters. That's not something I want. I'm not interested in thinking of my own interests locally and forgetting the ummah. No, the ummah has been brought to the forefront. I care about Palestine not because I'm Palestinian. I care about Palestine just as much as I cared about Syria, and just as much as I cared about Sudan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and other parts of this ummah, Lebanon, that are facing pain. So I need to stick to my guns and stick to my principles. I truly think that it's those subtle tests that arise in different parts of our life that end up having a big impact on the rest of our life decisions. So when I was in high school and I was called to do certain activities that I know don't please Allah, and I stuck to my principles and refused to give up on that, I truly think that has a big impact in building the mindset that I have today. And I think that applies to every single Muslim. Stick to your principles, because if you give up your principles, you will lose your identity. There are statistics about Muslims, generationally speaking, in the West, and how people who their ancestors came a few generations ago, some of them no longer identify as Muslims. That also happened in Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain. Generations after Al-Andalus was gone, that now you find the offspring of those Andalusians no longer identifying as Muslims. That's a scary thing, and that comes when we as a community wither in terms of our principles. And I think that people of Gaza taught the entire world, hey, you know what? There's nothing more precious or more valuable in life than being a principled individual. I'm not going to give up my principles for anything or anyone, right? So I think that this is number one. And it manifests in different ways, whether you're trying to make a decision of who to get married to, of what career path to seek, of who you keep as a close associate and a friend, how you spend your time, how you deal publicly and privately. If I'm a prince, and that's what I said in this last khutbah, look, we as a Muslim community are not disillusioned in thinking that politicians are going to come and change the world. That's not the way that change has ever happened, right? The best gift a mother or father could give to their son or daughter is building a true person of conscience. Someone who cares about the way their words affect others, their actions impact situations, and so on and so forth. So stick to your principles is one. The other thing I would say is, look, never isolate. Never isolate. I will tell you, through my experience as being an Imam, that one of the greatest contributors to devastation in people's personal lives is isolating away from good people. Everyone needs a good support system. When the Prophet ﷺ lost his support system, they call it the year of sorrow, Aam al-Huzn, right? So everyone needs good voices. When someone isolates away from good voices, it's the beginning of their demise and their downfall. I need that. Even if someone who's going to give me a little bit of tough love and tell me something that I don't necessarily want to hear, I should not want yes people in my circles. I should want people who are true, genuine. And if you find someone who's true and genuine, you hold on to that person wholeheartedly. And I think that's one of the critical things that's needed to resolve all life circumstances. Don't isolate. If I was to add a third, then I would say, look, one of the things that makes the world around us very dark and stark is loss of spirituality. And I think that many Muslims are realizing this, and we're at the cusp of a spiritual awakening. I think that when people embrace the spiritual path, they will find things in their lives reform in every different way. It's going to reform, whether you're talking about family dynamics or even your mental health, your emotional state. It causes a sense of peace and equilibrium within. Embracing the spiritual path is the thing that I will tell you will set people ahead in their lives. It's done it for the Ummah Muhammad ﷺ, and I said this recently. Every revival that has happened in Islamic history had the spiritual path front and center. Whether we're talking about the companions and the generation of companions who went to spread Islam to North Africa and parts of Asia, or even the generations after, when we're talking about Salah ad-Din and the generation of Salah ad-Din, or when we're talking about the Al-Andalus and Islam spreading in Al-Andalus, and we're talking about the Dawlat al-Murabitin, the Murabits. And there's a lot of anecdotal stuff that you could mention in that regard, but the spiritual path is a critical element, and that's what Islam sought to build. When I see a Muslim business owner being truly conscious of Allah Azza wa Jal in the buck he earns and the buck he spends, that is a big step towards the revival of the Ummah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Business owner, mother, father, teacher, we see this, and these are devastating things like in our community. And, why did I give this third advice? Because look, even when we're talking about our communities, one of the things in society, in our capitalist society, is to commercialize everything, is to beef up your resume, is to present yourself in a very fraudulent image. And those things only go so far. They don't really last. And we've seen reprehensible results, when people in position of power and influence abuse that power and position. It has devastating effects on people, spiritually speaking. So the spiritual path is a critical one for the Muslim community and for us as individuals to embrace. And there's a lot to say in that regard.
I love the point of spirituality that you bring. And the best thing a mother and father can give out in the world is a conscious adult. And one of the things that, really stuck with me is from the halaqah you have for the guys. And we were covering this section of the fiqh of transactions. And we were covering farming, actually. And in my head, when we first started that section, I'm like, why? It's 21st century, man. Like, I'm a corporate dude. Why would I need this? But then you went into the actual measurements. And that really opened my eyes. It's like, a scoopful, a cup, and like how you measure all these things. And I'm like, wow, it's so much more complicated. And like, really, like, for you to be honest and to yourself and Allah, like, it's a whole different ballgame there. Like, to be fair, and how do you stay true to that? And that kind of brings me to my next question is, being a community leader to the youth, you're really confronted with many questions, and some of these are very tough questions. What's the hardest question you've ever been asked by a young Muslim navigating today's world, and how did it challenge your approach as a leader?
I don't know if I'd be able to pinpoint one single question that I would identify as the most difficult question. I can tell you, what I perceive as like some of the most difficult things that, I had to try to figure out. Like one of those, for example, some of the conversations I've had with people who are dealing with personal struggles are people who are struggling with their sexual identity. And it's a new thing. Nothing that I learned at Al-Azhar directly positions me to be able to answer these new challenges that society has for us right now. Like the whole idea of gender identity and being this long laundry list of gender identity and the pronouns and everything like that. These are things is difficult to come to terms with, But I always try when I have these conversations to keep an open mind. I don't like to take the approach of command and prohibit. I like to try to search for answers and reflect and have a give and take. So I remember some of the individuals who came to speak to me, I identified as being gay and having attractions to the same gender. And part of their struggle was, does Allah hate me? Why are you telling me that Islam is saying that there's no place for me? I didn't say that, but of course, like that's the assumption for someone who's dealing with this. How can I not act upon my same-sex attraction? The situations that I'm referring to is people who wanted to engage in a relationship with someone that they were in contact with, but they wanted to find religious justification for that. And those are pretty difficult situations to deal with because you find that it mixes between people's emotional states and people's desires, and it's really difficult to change a mindset that is unwilling to give and take. And that's one of the challenges today, like even about speaking about these issues, like the whole political correctness and stuff like that. If I was in a different career path, and I was to even have this conversation like this, it would be, it would end your entire career, because now there's this, fascist approach that's being taken, where people are not allowed to even express their views on this issue. There's a great hostility. People are unwilling to give and take. So I clarified to the individual to the best of my ability. I reasoned, and I shared my thoughts, and I made it very clear to them. Hey, look, God doesn't hate you. Be very clear about this. There's one thing if I'm against certain actions and behaviors. Another thing, Islam never teaches me to dehumanize people, right? There's empathy there. There's human regard there. There's disagreement, of course, and there's certain things that I can't accept, But I would say that those are some of the extra difficult situations that I've been presented with. I guess you could say some other types that also fall in the same vein are the very complicated family dynamics. When I have to address questions from people who I know they're really dealing with a really, really, really tough family situation that's so wrongful, and it's not right, and you need to give them some glimmer of hope, and they can't necessarily just turn their back on those closest to them. So how do you continue to try to give that person hope when they're in a very seemingly hopeless situation? It's a very difficult thing to deal with.
SubhanAllah, I think these are the type of issues that for a lot of people drive them away from Islam, right? In order to run away and maybe hide from these issues, from the damage or the fear of what these issues could cause to them. But I think, as you were saying, like the ability to come to you and talk about it is something that is so important, and so like something that we should definitely encourage within the community. I know that even speaking just closely within my friend group and those that I regard as my friends, it's something that comes up so often in the fact that, like, I don't know what's going to be taught in schools 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Like, my biggest fear is for my kid to come up to me and say, like, I don't know what my sexual identity is. It's something that even has driven people to consider moving to a Muslim country or another country. Like, what's your 2 cents on that, and how should we navigate that uncertainty?
I wish I had a clear answer for you, because I think the world dynamics are complicated wherever you go. The world dynamics, they're not simple. I guess you could say, unless you're gonna find yourself a farm in the middle of nowhere's land.
Well, at least now we're prepared with your fiqh farming class.
Yeah. Look, the world's a tough place.
Yeah.
And, you don't succeed in life by running away from the challenges. If it's a challenge that Allah Azza wa Jal has put in my path, I need to embrace that challenge, and I will need to work through it. I'll tell you this. Those who I've seen succeed in life are those who are willing to give a listening ear and benefit from the experiences of others. Those who are really taking a humble demeanor to whatever is unfolding in front of them. Those are the ones who I see succeed in life. Those who double down, insist, don't want to hear anyone's advice. The Quran says this. When the Prophet would give his people advice and they would react with rebellion. وَنَصَحْتُ لَكُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُحِبُّونَ النَّاصِحِينَ. It is human nature not to like advisors. But those of success truly benefit from the presence of advisors. I've never found something more effective in leading to demise and ruin and failure than someone blocking out all of the good advice that comes their way. If Allah wanted me to get exposed to this, sometimes, and this is something that's spoken about in the books of spirituality, sometimes Allah Azza wa Jal allows someone to utter something that they're unwittingly and unknowingly addressing something that is really relevant to a person's life. It's as though they feel that person's addressing them, and that person's not really addressing them.
Right.
But Allah allowed this person to utter those words and allowed me to listen to those words so that it could be seen, how will I then react to it? So that's a critical thing I would just add there. Look, every life situation could be figured out. I just need to have the humility to listen, observe, look for answers, search. And if I do that, I'll find real success.
Everyone has this notion, like, even like any issue that I have, I'll just go to Shaykh. Like, he studied for so many years and, he went to such and such. I'll just go and get a quick answer. And they kind of forget that you're also human. It takes time for you to like process something, and not everything's in a book, like how you were saying, like these new issues that are arising.
Absolutely. There's no clear answer that I would tell you to that would fix every single situation. Anyone who claims to have all the answers to everything is someone you should be very careful of. I don't have all the answers to everything, and just as you seek me for advice, I seek others for advice too. I have my own advisors that I go to. And that should never stop. That should never, no one's above that need. We're all just human beings trying to find our way in this life.
What do you look for in a good advisor, like personally?
What do I look for in a
Yeah.
good advisor? Yeah, a bunch of things. Like among what I look for is their own personal character, because their personal character will affect me. You don't go to a sheikh just for information. That's a very wrongful approach, because information could be abused, right? You look for the way they engage that information. So I look to their character. Are they sincere? Do they practice what they say? Do they have, and what's the litmus test to all this? Compare their character to the character that you see in the Prophet ﷺ. Do they call to what the Prophet calls? Or do they show any worldly ambition? The Prophet wasn't a caller to himself. So anyway, these are different cues. Like I look for someone who truly fears Allah, has impeccable character. And I also look for someone who has a rich set of life experiences. And that's why I told you before, and I think everyone would be wise to do this, is like seek those individuals who have a lot of life experience to make them your close friends and associates. That, احرص على ما ينفعك, as we learn from the Prophet, be keen on your best interest. So if it's in my best interest to make close friendships with people in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, then you better believe it, I should do that.
In a world that's quick to redefine identity, how do you think Muslims can stay true to their faith without feeling left behind? I think there's a lot of opinions and stuff when it comes to like staying true, follow this path, you gotta follow this example. Do you think that there's a secret to like balancing Islamic identity and pressures of modern life?
I wouldn't say secret. There is definitely a big challenge. And look, this journey of change, we spoke about like a fragment of time within this greater change that's happening in the ummah. Even the reality of Islamic scholarship has drastically changed from pre-modern era to today. And there's a lot of influencers and contributors to that. The rise and fall of Islamic scholarship is linked with the rise and fall of nations, right? So, there's a lot to say to what happened to Islamic institutions and hubs of learning after World War I and after Ottoman Empire was no more. And after the nation-state reality, took effect, and after those of religious scholarship and leadership were classified as the lowest on the totem pole, right? Those who couldn't get into anything else would go down that path. That's how it was in many of our Muslim countries, right? So that created a reality in Islamic scholarship that made it very difficult to stay with the changes that happened in the modern era. A lot of questions the scholars grappled with because the Islamic learning institutions were not up to par with being able to deal with those bigger challenges in a very changing world, right? So to your question, I think that we need people who have a very deep and profound understanding of reality and have a strong and authentic commitment to the Islamic tradition, the legal tradition, the spiritual tradition, and are able to bridge that gap that's between there. So I think that it takes a whole lot of knowledge and awareness. It's not easy to get there, but we could only continue to try to contribute to the things that'll lead to that result. I need to become more aware of the finance industry, of what's happening in people's education, and what's happening in college campuses, what's happening politically. And the more I'm aware, if I have an authentic Islamic understanding, I will be able to apply that awareness on the relevant circumstances that unfold in my life. So it's a tough gap to bridge. It's a tough bridge to gap, I should say. All right?
No, you got it right the first time.
Okay, there you go. It's a tough gap to bridge. There you go.
Hopefully we're not gapping bridges, but in terms of building bridges over gaps,
I mean,
Um,
they're still working on that one from 2 years ago.
Maybe they can learn something. But
What more can we do to uplift emerging Muslim leaders and entrepreneurs who want to drive change and make a positive change impact?
And this would be a word of advice for anyone who is building a career for themselves and representing the Muslim community in different facets. What you're doing is a very critical part to the growth of the ummah. We need a diverse leadership coming from all range of activities, whether we're talking about things that affect society as a whole, or we're talking about things that affect, the business sector, education, politics, or whatever it is. We need Muslims and Muslim representation in all of these spheres. I would advise what our scholars have advised in the past. There's a certain level of awareness that is necessary, that is non-negotiable when it comes to my religious values and my religion. I can't be someone who's born Muslim and been Muslim my entire life and is utterly disconnected from the Book of Allah. I can't be someone who's completely unaware of the basics of Islamic creed, of basic information about the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. Part of bridging this gap is to equip people of different expertise with the basic level of Islamic knowledge that will enlighten their own personal decisions in their life. Like if I'm meant to make decisions according to what's most pleasing to Allah, I can't do that if I'm completely unaware of what Allah expects of me as a person. And the only way I could become aware is if I make that really a priority. So I think that my advice to people in different fields is, hey, look, make your deen a priority. Give Islam a chance and you'll find it'll completely change your life. It'll change the way you operate in your business, in your school, in your family, and everything in between. I think that level of raising awareness is I should say the secret sauce for making those great achievements that Muslim entrepreneurs, academics, and leaders are already achieving in their different facets. That's the secret sauce. How can I link that back to a greater mission and a greater purpose in my life?
You're someone who turned the pressure of your life into purpose. How do you think young Muslims today can feel, who feel the weight of the world on their shoulders? What practical steps would you offer them to help them follow in your footsteps and turn pressure into purpose?
Look, I said some of this in what I was saying earlier. That is, look for the divine cues. Look for the divine inspiration.
How do you know something is a divine cue?
I need to be someone who embraces the spiritual path. It'll become a sixth sense. Just as we have eyes and ears, and we have other faculties by which we engage our reality. If I'm someone who's always reflecting spiritually and is always connecting spiritually, it'll be something that's part of my being, right? So that's what I should be seeking. What are the signs that Allah wants me to see? Let me reflect on that. I'm not talking about it like a dream or something like that. Well, it could be a dream, but I'm talking about something more than that. Where there's this beautiful quote of they ask one of our righteous predecessors, "How did you get to know Allah?" So he said, "بنقض العزائم وصرف الهمم." By undoing what I had set my heart to, and the redirections that come in my life. And what does that mean? So I wanted to go down this career path, and then I found certain life circumstances altered that path and made it something else. I could choose to be devastated or depressed, or I could choose to try to reflect and see beyond. And the same thing with marriage. Sometimes I would set my heart to a certain marriage proposal, and then some circumstances arise that make the path that I really wanted for myself impossible. There are people who contemplate suicide when that happens. But if I look beyond with a divine eye, and sometimes I will not be able to see that before things unfold and happen. But but in retrospect, I will be able to see that. And this is something the Quran says to the companions. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُطْلِعَكُمْ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ. Allah would not expose the unseen to you, but know this: Allah chooses whomever He wills from His prophets. And in the moment while they were carrying the message alongside the Prophet ﷺ, it might not have been crystal clear how profound of an impact what the actions of the Prophet ﷺ would have on humanity as a whole for coming generations. It probably was not that because they didn't see it. They couldn't imagine it. Where now we're in a reality where there's more than 1.5 billion Muslims in this world, right? And it all started in its infant stages from something, some small effort by a small band of believers that spread far and wide. So that's exactly an example of that. Look for the divine cues. If things change in your life, well, ask yourself why. And if you can't think of good answers, maybe go to someone who could impress the wisdoms behind that upon you spiritually, right? So that's what my advice would be.
So to really get that barakah, to really summarize that, to get the barakah in like whatever you do, you have to be willing to accept that change and be resilient.
Yeah. Accept that change and capitalize on that change, and again exude resilience in every facet of your life.
When you look at today's Muslim youth, what gives you the most hope, and where do you see their potential to drive change and really make an impact?
When I see the reality in front of me and what's happening around the world, it inspires hope more and more. I mentioned this in one of my khutbahs, I think it was a few years back now, and one of the attendees of the khutbah scoffed at the thought. It's like, what are you talking about, hope? The ummah is backwards. The ummah is hundreds of years behind everyone else. Muslims are among the most disorganized individuals in the world. They never could work with each other. I listed the laundry list of all the reasons why the ummah is in a bad condition. But what this person doesn't see is when you zoom out, what are you talking about? You don't see the tide and how it's turning. There was once upon a time where I remember, those in my parents' generation who described in the Muslim world where in certain countries you would be pressed to find a single sister wearing hijab in a university. There was a certain time, and I remember, and when I would visit my country, and this was in the 90s, Palestine, and I prayed. And they saw me as the stranger. Like, what do you mean you pray? You're a sheikh or something like that? Because to them, it was strange and bizarre to see a young person who wanted to pray at the mosque, because the mosque was occupied by people who were retired and older in age. Like, what do you mean? But now, things are transforming. We have generations of younger people who really want to seek Allah's pleasure, who are really, inserting themselves in the masjid and in Islamic institutions. We have the number of Islamic institutions, even in the West, that has grown in the past 20, 30 years, exponential amount of growth, right? And you're going to tell me, and you see all of that, and you see all signs of despair. How on earth do you see that? Can you not see it? Even, before the events that happened in Gaza in this past year, the ummah was sort of losing hope about the cause of Palestine, because it's now something that's been going on for a few generations. And not too long, but 2-3 generations now, 3 generations. I have one of my aunts, she's older than the state of Israel, right? So she was there before the state of Israel was announced. So for the past 3 generations, we've been struggling in many different ways. The past year has brought that Palestinian cause to the forefront. I call it the Islamic cause. Islamic cause is a better term, right? To the forefront in the minds of so many people. So many people have been guided to Islam just because of how the people of Gaza have exuded their iman in such difficult situations. People saw, whoa, what is that? How do these people have this type of faith, right? So you want me to see that and then fall into despair from the condition of the ummah? Not at all. I see all of the greatest reasons for hope, right? Wallahu alam.
Is there one question you think every Muslim should be asking themselves as they look towards the future? What would it be?
What I reflect on is, look, I'm here today. I might not be here. I might not be here tomorrow. The question that I think would give people a sense of urgency in the moments that they have in this life is asking themselves, when is my time coming? When is my time coming? This is something the companions observed, like as it says, we learn from them. If you live to see nightfall, don't expect to see the crack of dawn. And if you live to see the morning, don't think you'll be around until nighttime. And life shows us tons of examples of people who exit this life way too soon, or I should not say way too soon, at their appointed hour, but they just didn't know that it was their appointed time. Their appointed time came. So look, that when it's all said and done, once I exit this life, this entire reality becomes irrelevant to me, except from the standpoint of the things that I did. Everything in the hereafter is weighed in terms of deeds, the things I did and the things I didn't do, and how does that ultimately affect my permanent destination, Jannah or Nar. That's what it really comes down to. When is my moment coming? Is it coming tomorrow? Is it coming in a week? Or is it coming in a few months? You have no idea. No idea. Oh, may Allah help us.
So actually, I've met Muslims, and even non-Muslims, where, their ideology in life, it's, I'm going to die one day. Who cares about like what I do? Who cares about what's going on in the world? What would be your response to that?
No, for us, death, the notion of death is the very reason why I care, right? Because I believe in something beyond it, where I'll be called to account for everything that was in it, right? So yeah, the notion of death is actually this empowering thing. It's not this, gloomy, despairing type of thing, for us as Muslims. If I know that my moment is going to come, then how am I going to be when that time comes? What situation will I be in? And where will my soul end up? And, how will it feel? When I'm on the other side, what's going to happen?
Sheikh, we can't thank you enough. And to close this episode out, we wanted to play this game, or kind of just simple rapid fire round called Imam's Bucket List, just to connect with you better. What are a few things on your personal or professional bucket list? Whether it's a project or a skill or something adventurous you really want to do. Help us kind of understand you a little bit better.
I'm not used to delving in this side of things that much.
We got him today.
Certain things I wanted to do. Well, the life of an Imam consumes his time, You'll find that many Imams who are successful at what they do end up becoming workaholics. So it becomes my life, right? It becomes my life. It's not a work. It's not a job. It becomes my life. So one thing I've been trying to do is I'm more interested in education, right? So I love teaching classes, having courses and stuff like that. One thing that all this is, I hope ultimately contributes to, is for me to actually be able to have something that's organized, structured, in actually really building up the knowledge base of Muslims in our area. That's one wish and one dream I have, to be able to do something that is very impactful, effective in terms of building the knowledge base of Muslims. Other fun things I like to do, or personal things that I hope for. Well, I hope I could finish my journey on losing weight, So I've been trying to lose some weight for some time, subhanAllah. When we were in the pandemic, and COVID happened, I got hit with COVID pretty bad. I got hospitalized. And I just remember the whole experience and the circumstance, the thought of, and at that time, I just had one daughter at the time. And, there was like so many stories of people who lost their life at a young age during COVID. So I remember like during that time it sparked the initial thoughts of, well, I need to try to take advantage of the moments I have here in a little bit of better way. So I hope I could lose some weight. I remember once upon a time I used to play basketball when I was younger and maybe perhaps half my size. I used to
What
like
position?
playing. Huh?
What position?
Not professional.
He was a beast. He was all over the court.
I mean,
yeah, he's a one-man army.
Man. I used to have a pretty good shot. So,
we gotta test this out.
Gotta bring it back.
Inshallah. Yeah, so that's one thing I like to do. Besides that, I really liked spending time studying overseas. If I could continue journey learning by some way or another, I'll continue for master's, PhD. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate that and will that.
Again, just thank you so much for being a part of this. Muslim Made would not be able to exist without you and without the impact that you've made in our lives, and to help us connect closer to Deen, Islam, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and through the amazing awakening that you've caused in these like last few years, for all of us. I don't think you really understand how much of an impact you've been able to make. So, thank you so much. And, I
May
hope that
Allah
Allah
keep you healthy.
increase you and keep you close to us.
Jazakallah khair for the opportunity.
Part of the barakah of Muslim Made is because of you. So I appreciate that.
May Allah bless you guys and reward you for what you're doing.